everyone, and welcome to episode 16. We have a little mini episode coming at you of the big life. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. First of all, we are so thankful for all of you guys, all of our listeners who tune in, all the support we've gotten throughout this season. And, I think Jordyn and I will get into it a bit, but we might need that support a little bit right now, a bit of the both of us. So, Jordyn, how are you doing?
Oh, what a big question there, Sam. I'm hanging in there. It's definitely episode 16. We talk about it every week, how we can't believe how fast it goes by. But when it all comes to an end and you really start to kind of break it down, so much happens throughout the season. So many things go down, and both of our seasons ended up ending this last week, unfortunately. So we get to now sit in that and kind of process all of those nice emotions go along with it. And for us, we just got back late last night. We are the very, very beginning of that kind of, process to figure out what this season has meant to us, both as an individual and as a team basis. But overall, it's sad. It's just a sad feeling to have it all close out, come to an end. And I'm sure we'll get into it probably more next week once we really have time to process everything and figure out what this season has meant to us. But you're sad to see it come to an end and close out. How are you doing?
Oh, great question. I was talking to my coaches today. I was actually in my coach's office for about an hour this morning, which, only took 2 days for me to find my way back there. And it's all hitting me in waves still. So for us, both of us had historic years. And that's the first thing I think we need to call out and say and celebrate. I mean, for the first time in Michigan State history, the Michigan State women's soccer team made it to the Sweet 16. Played a great game against BYU, unfortunately closing their season, but it was a tough game. It was one I know I was watching and on the edge of my seat on. And for us, we also had a historic season and made it to the round of 32 and came up just short against Georgia. And so, I mean, I've felt so many things in the past couple of days. There's a lot. Don't worry, we've joked about me ugly crying constantly, and it happened again. I said it would, and it did happen again, but this time for some good closure. On the field on Friday in South Carolina. And, I'm sad, I'm happy, I'm proud, I'm so many things. And I think it just kind of keeps hitting you. Like, it's scary to say I'm no longer a college athlete. And my season in my career at the University of Iowa is done. And it's weird to say out loud. And even this is going to sound really odd, but I know I've given a lot to this program. I know I've been here for 5 years, but this morning I was, putting on whatever outfit, and I felt kind of weird putting on an Iowa soccer hoodie. It just is I'm not on the team anymore. And that hits you more than you know. I don't think we would have had the legs for the round of 16. I know the team gave it all that they got. I'm so proud of this group, but it hurts. And it is the end of an era. And I committed to the University of Iowa when I was 15 years old. I'm 23 now. So this program has been in my life for 8 years. And so for that to be over and it to be in a different aspect is weird. And I don't know how I feel about it yet.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole different batch of emotions, I'm sure, for everyone else on the field. No matter what you're feeling kind of as the game goes on, once that whistle blows and you look around, you're sad to see those seniors go and know that that's the last time stepping onto the field with them. And that's really just the only thing that goes on for the next, 24, 48 hours that you're feeling is just, that gratitude to them for giving everything they have to the program, the university, and to you, leaving it all out on the field. And you're sad to see it all come to an end and to move on from it. So for me, I am so grateful I have another year. I'm officially a senior in terms of the Michigan State soccer program. End of season's it's weird. It's a weird mix of emotions. You're happy that you made it so far. You're grateful to everything that's happened. You're, sad to see it all come to an end.
The crazy thing, I feel like a season goes by, like we said, so crazily quick, but it's also, there's so many chapters. We went to Florida Gulf Coast this year and played for our first season game. And that feels like it was about 3 years ago. Even 2 weeks ago, we won the Big Ten tournament championship. And that feels like it was about a year ago. It's so crazy how fast everything goes and how you have to turn off celebrating one thing because it's on to the next. And everything is always like, wrap that up, move on, wrap that up, move on for so long that like this period is so sad, but it's also like, oh, I can actually like step back, like for myself, you're wrapping up, you're typing your typical 5th year senior goodbye to the Iowa soccer program post, as we all on my team, I felt like we're doing this weekend. And like, I look back on it and like, I don't define my career by stats in any means, but like, dang, I've played some numbers and like, I'm beyond proud of that. I mean, COVID had played a large part of it, being healthy for 5 years, which I was joking with my coach earlier. How in God's name did that happen? Like that was just a blessing that, someone bestowed on me being able to stay healthy for 5 years. But I played in 97 college soccer games in my career in fall seasons only, like competitive real season games. Started 96 of them. Both of those are Iowa soccer program history records. So like officially the most, and then against Georgia. So sorry, Sarah Wheaton, who's 1 year older than me, who had a 5th year, I officially broke the minute record. So like I'm leaving as the person who's worn the Hawkeye uniform the most in program history. And so like, I mean, how could I be nothing but pride in that? And like in a team, like we've won 2 Big Ten tournament championships in program history. Both were during my career. We've been to the round of 32 twice in program history, both during my career. So like, I have nothing but to be proud of, but it's also just like, oh, like all of that's over. And now there's this giant question of what's next. And that's a whole nother question that I have to deal with tackling over the next couple of weeks. Like we're all kind of joking around talking, like I get married in 20 days, Jordyn. I am 20 days from getting married. That's terrifying. Like that's ridiculous. So like I've been so focused on season and everything that like my fiance has just turned into the wedding planner and I just focus on soccer. So all of a sudden I'm like, oh, like we're getting married. That's a thing that's happening too. So life's a bit crazy right now. It's a bit of an emotional whirlwind. But we're on the right of it. We're on a path.
Oh yeah. I mean, if there's anything we've learned from Dean Linke, it's that Sam Cary's life is anything but boring. Always spending 25 out of the 24 hours we have. Seriously, don't know how you do it. But, incredibly proud of you. There's no one better, I think, to represent the Iowa program and to wear that uniform the most. I think it's very, very fitting. And it's incredible what we've done here with this podcast. It's something I'm super, super proud of. We've kind of journaled our entire college season thus far, and to see it all come to a close, it's absolutely crazy how far we've come and how much we've been able to accomplish. So thank you guys for giving us this platform and allowing us to do this with you.
Absolutely. So Jordyn, let's talk a bit deeper. Tell me about your game against Harvard. That was a crazy game. I watched all of it. Game winner off of a PK, all this stuff. Talk about the emotions of winning that game in the round of 32 and what that meant to big program history.
Yeah, just a little bit of logistics for anyone who doesn't know. So once you make the NCAA tournament, they will actually pay for 22, which is the number of players you're allowed to roster and wear the jerseys. They'll pay for you guys to kind of go out there and for your travel expenses. Michigan State, what we did for this tournament was that we picked up the tab for the other 8 of us. So all 30 players, we chartered down there and we had the whole team with us for those 2 games, which was Harvard. We ended up winning 1-0, and then BYU, which we unfortunately lost in the round of 16. But going into that Harvard game, knowing that it was going to make history, knowing it was on the line, we spent an incredible amount of time preparing for it. We felt very ready, felt very prepared. And I think once the game came up, once that time came, there was no doubt we were going to win it. When you look back, I think for us, TCU last year, which is when we lost in the second round, there was a lot of nerves, a lot of what ifs, we've never made it this far, all this stuff. This year felt very, very different. It was a lot calmer. It was almost we're gonna win this. There was no other option. There was no other feeling. We were going to win that game. And once it started, we knew. We felt good, things were going our way. And I mean, the game was close, don't get me wrong. Harvard had, great game. They put up a lot of great shots to end it. It was definitely a nail biter, but I'm very, very confident that this one was going to go our way, and to see it all come and to know we made history again as a team and as a program, and to have everyone there. Such an incredible feeling, very, very euphoric, just that celebration, and then going back to the hotel later that night and just kind of debriefing it all and being like, we did it. It was a great feeling.
Yeah, it has to be. You know, it's interesting. Like, I think that was the one element we may have been missing against Georgia. And we were confident. We knew we like the biggest thing for us, and we've said it all year, Iowa's always an underestimated team in our opinion. You know, we're always like, oh, and then there's Iowa. And even the marketing that was around the game was like making us extremely mad. There was marketing, you know, by people such as like the NCAA that were saying, oh, Georgia expects to be here. Iowa's happy to be here was the tagline of the game. And we were like, if that doesn't make you mad, like what else does? Like no one respects us. And we knew that. And Georgia's a great team. They're the SEC tournament champions, but we're the Big Ten tournament champions. Like, let's go here. And so I mean, it was a battle. And like, that's what I'm most proud of. And I even said it to my mom before the game. Like, at the end of the day, I knew what I was facing. Like, you lose and my career is done at this point. And I said, you know, no matter what happens, I can't always control that. But what I can control is that myself. And then I try my best to get my team to leave everything on the field. And that's what I'm beyond proud of that we did. And, you know, it was 0-0 at halftime. We felt good. We had the better chances, you know, we were moving the ball. Like I remember going to halftime, like we're winning this game. Like we got this. And I felt great about what we were doing out there. And second half got a little crazy. I don't know if I've seen a 5-goal second game half or second half of the game in a while. But that just shows how close it was. And I think, you know, we just left it all on the field and it just didn't bounce our way. So Georgia scores first, and think 3 minutes later we answered, make it 1-1. They score second. And so at this point, we're like just throwing numbers forward because what do you have to lose at that point? And unfortunately, they scored third to make it 3-1. And with 1 minute and 45 seconds left, we got our second. And I mean, in the last minute, we hit the crossbar, we hit the post, we had a great, like, there was so many, like, you're like, dang, like, it's almost like sometimes like the soccer gods aren't on your side. Like, they didn't really feel on our side against Georgia, I'll say that. But, you know, when that final whistle blew, like, I did the whole collapse to my knees. My team, you know, ran around me, everything. But like, there's nothing but pride in that game. And, you know, like as much as I like think we maybe would have left one game on the table and we could have taken Georgia, I also, you know, don't know how quickly we could have recovered with the 1-day recovery going into Clemson. And, you know, there's a lot of factors that would have, could have, should have of it all. But like also this year, you know, like I said, my 5th year, we were projected to finish 10th in the Big Ten. We were projected to not even make the Big Ten tournament and to win and then frankly, but we got into the Big Ten tournament by the skin of our teeth. We've joked about that. We've talked about it. And then to win the Big Ten championship, to make it to the round of 32, to play Georgia so tight, like there's nothing that you can leave with your head down on. And that's the biggest part that you can remember.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the second round of the tournament. So in terms of Big Ten teams, you have Michigan State, Nebraska, and Penn State all advancing to the round of 16, while unfortunately Iowa and Wisconsin get knocked out. So now we played on Thursday because BYU doesn't play on Sundays. So while everyone else played on Friday, Michigan State played on Thursday, Michigan State and BYU. Now we're playing on Saturday before everyone else's game. And we end up losing, 3-1. And I got to just give props to BYU. I think there's not much I felt walking away from that game that we could have done. Of course, there's little moments that you keep replaying in your head, but overall, I mean, the goals were valid. They were incredible goals. The PK we had, whether or not it was a PK, they kind of scored on it anyways. So it was like it saved us, and then they ended up scoring on the PK. So it all just kind of washed out. But yeah, I mean, we knew it was going to be really, really hard going into it, having only a 1-day recovery, essentially. It was a really strange schedule we had where we didn't practice then. We didn't get on a ball, do anything, kind of just did active recovery with stretching, foam rolling, treatment plans, stuff like that. And then we had a lot of scout. It was probably the most information we got on the team in the quickest amount of time we've ever had. Film, a lot of scout. The next day, we didn't end up playing until 6 p.m. on Saturday. So we had kind of that whole morning to kind of review the game plan, figure things out, go over it, and then prep. So yeah, we just did a lot of active recovery, a lot of scout, a lot of film, got a lot of meals, which I'm gonna miss as the season comes to an end, let me tell you. Gonna definitely miss those team meals and that per diem. But yeah, so I mean, I didn't expect it to really hit as hard because I was so proud of everything we've done. I was like, it was a good loss, it was a good season. But the second that whistle blows, you look around and you realize that's the last time you're going to step foot on the field with some of those players. Everyone just starts breaking down. And we knew it was 3-1. So you kind of were able to prepare yourself as the whistle and the time ran down. Didn't make it any easier, let me tell you. I thought it would. It didn't. It was such a hard thing to look around and have to say goodbye to these players on this field who poured their heart out to the program and the team, and then sit in a hotel with them for another 24 hours. Where like last year we were at Notre Dame, so we just got on a bus and went home. This year you're back at a hotel in Utah. We didn't leave until the next day on 3 separate flights. Some of us getting home, between 5 p.m. was the first group, and then the last group wasn't until like 2 a.m. that they got back to East Lansing in our apartment. So it was a chaotic day of travel for the next day, and just very, very strange situation to kind of find yourself in as you're, processing all of those emotions and feelings of losing and seeing your season come to an end, something that you knew was going to happen, but nobody's ever prepared for, I think.
No, and it's hard because it's something that you can't prepare for, because you can't think about those emotions while you're still in it. And like, that's something I've been battling, I feel like, this entire season, is how do you take in every moment, but also like not get too emotional. And like, there's so many different balances that come into play. And you're right. I mean, when that final whistle blows, like, you're never ready, no matter how much you knew.
Yeah, exactly. So unfortunately, we're the only team that lost in that round for the Big Ten tournament. You had Nebraska win 4-0 over UC Irvine, and then Penn State won 4-3 in double overtime against SLU. So they're both advancing to the round of 8 here Friday, I believe.
Yeah. And it'll be a Clemson versus Penn State at Clemson, and then it'll be Nebraska against Stanford at Stanford. So 2 great games. Definitely ones I know I'll be paying attention to. Huge shout out to Nebraska and Penn State. I mean, obviously it's everyone's goal to keep making it further and further. And, now it's just go Big Ten at this point. I think, people don't value how much like the entire time I was rooting for Michigan State, and I know they were rooting for us, and we were rooting for Wisconsin. Like, you want your conference to do well at this point. Selfishly, we're like, all right, Penn State has to win the national championship, because then by mathematics, we beat Penn State, so we're the national champions. That's where our brains are at right now. But I think that's how the math works, if that makes sense.
I mean, it's kind of adding up for you guys. I think over here, like the Penn State, Michigan State beef goes deep, man. It's like, anyone else in the Big Ten want to step it up? Like Nebraska, we got you all the way. Iowa, 100%. Penn State, good luck. We have to.
Oh gosh. So what does end of season look like, Jordyn? We're both on a little bit 2 different schedules right now. What does the rest of the semester look like for you?
Well, now I don't know, actually. And we haven't figured out any of the plans. At some point after this Thanksgiving break, we'll have a team meeting, kind of go over things. You'll start to have your coaches meetings, end of the year wrap-ups with, Jeff and the coaching staff as we move forward. And then I'm assuming we're not going to train again as a team with coaches until after we get back from winter, which is how it worked last year. You'll have captain's practices and kind of open times where you can go, and we'll get small-sided games, things like that. You can train on your own, but there won't be anything super organized or structured until we get back in January, and the rest of this time you get back from Thanksgiving break, and it's really only like 2 weeks before you have finals. So locking in academically, as we were students instead of student athletes, I think, for a majority of this season, and have to figure that out real quick. Looking at my D2L the other day, and I think I'm becoming an academic victim a lot more than an academic weapon here.
Oh gosh. All right, we got a little bit of time to fix that up. We will, right before finals, I know. Yeah, Iowa looks a bit different. The University of Iowa does things a bit differently. So we don't have a fall break during the year, but it's attached to Thanksgiving. So I'm actually podcasting from my grandma's basement right now, back in good old St. Louis. And yeah, so I got home today, and I'll be home all week, and then head back to Iowa. We're taking this week as our mandatory 7 days off, which you're required to have after season ends. And then the team will start training on Monday. when we get back, we'll do a week's worth of training, and then you hit dead week and then finals week. So it's just for a week. That's where it's kind of weird for me right now to figure out my place. Obviously, typically I wouldn't attend training next week, which sounds so crazy to say. And most, people leaving the program aren't. However, that being said, I do want to continue my playing career, as we've talked about. So the coaches have luckily signed all the waivers and paperwork. So the team hasn't gotten rid of Cary quite yet. I will be at training next week. Sorry, guys, if you're listening. I know that probably breaks all your hearts. But yeah, I'll be with the group next week. And then, all the fun of individual meetings and the chaos that kind of off-season can bring, which I know in future episodes, we're excited to kind of dive into all of that stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Our NWSL draft is in about a month. Your name sliding in there?
We are figuring that out in the next 2 weeks. I will keep the podcast updated as I figure out my own life, which is a very, very scary sentence to say out loud right now. I said I had a meeting with my coach this morning and we were like talking about so many options. I'm like, I am overwhelmed. So we'll figure that out. TBD. But yeah, so speaking of, Jordyn is working on her academic weapon status being reinstated. So she had an exam and studying to do while I took over the interview part of this podcast. So we are so excited to have our amazing sponsors who we talk about all the time, Ida Sports. They have their lead sports scientist who basically helps design the shoes, helps figure out, different research as to like why this matters. We talk about women's feet versus men's feet, adapting to women's bodies, controlling the controllables and all these things. And, you can't do that without a sports scientist. So we're so excited to be talking to Emelia Funnell, the lead sports scientist for Ida Sports, and talking all things footwear, injury prevention, ACLs, everything we can talk about. So we're super excited about that. And we are sad that Jordyn will be working on her academic weapon status, which we cannot wait to get an update on how it reinstates.
Hopefully very, very quickly and, with big margins.
Big margins. All right. So we are thankful for our incredible seasons, our incredible listeners, and Jordyn's academic brain this Thanksgiving. And we hope that you all have safe travels, a happy holiday, and we cannot wait to talk to you guys next week.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Big Life Podcast. We talk all the time on this show about how much we love Ida Sports, how much they mean to us. And since this episode's coming out on Thanksgiving, we thought what better than to talk about something we're truly grateful for, and that's ingenuity and creativity in the women's space. So who better than to have Emelia Funnell on from Ida Sports? She is the lead sports scientist and really works with Ida and doing everything that they do. So first of all, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
As you can tell, I told Emelia this earlier, we're down one voice. Jordyn is over here putting the student and student athlete and getting her exams done. So I have the honor of talking to Emelia today while Jordyn does her fun exam. So we wish her all the best in that. That being said, all right, Emelia, first, can you just give us a little bit of background on Ida and like how everything came to be with what you all do?
Yeah, definitely. So it's got a great story, actually. So first of all, Ida develops and designs performance sports footwear for female athletes. So right now we're in the football space, making, football boots, otherwise known as soccer cleats, depending on where you are. But we also have a variety of athletes wearing our shoes. They might be an ultimate frisbee player, a rugby player. So they can kind of be used for a variety of different sports, depending on the specific needs of that sport and the surface and all of the players as well. But interestingly, Ida kind of started on a mountain. So Laura Youngson, our co-founder, led a group of women to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro in a successful attempt to play the world's highest altitude football match for any gender, and it happened to be a group of women that were doing it. So this group kind of included a bunch of ex and current international football players, as well as sports physios, coaches, all of that. And so kind of while on this big trek to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, she had a bunch of chats with these women and figured out that a lot of the women were actually wearing soccer cleats that were either kids or men's. And she found out that unlike in running shoes, where for many years now you've been able to go into a shop and go to a women's wall of running shoes, unlike that in football or soccer, that didn't exist. So it was basically all kind of soccer cleats were designed for men. And then in a term that is kind of laughed at now, but they were then they used the term shrink it and pink it. to then kind of market it towards women. So they just put it in a smaller size, throw some pink on it, and there you go. That was your women's kind of soccer cleat. So Laura kind of recognized this need to kind of develop something that was designed specifically for females and, for their needs on the pitch, to be able to perform the best that they could.
That's awesome. And so we're talking about, obviously in so many facets of life, we've had this shrink it and pink it kind of mentality. What is the real difference between a men's and a women's soccer cleat? Like, why does it matter?
Yeah. So there's been a lot of studies and, foot scanning done throughout the past few years, actually decades of years. And it's been found that women tend to have differently shaped feet than men. So the ratio of the width at the ball of the foot, compared to the heel is quite different. So we kind of describe it in an easy diagram of women's feet being more triangular and men's potentially being more rectangular because of that different ratio of width at the ball of the foot and the heel. So women might find that their heels are actually slipping a bunch in men's shoes. They might get loads of blisters. Back when I played, quite seriously, when I was younger, I still play, but quite recreationally. And back then I would wear shoes and I would remember having to bandage my feet up before every match, like with blister band-aids. And it was a whole process I had so that I wasn't, torn up by the end of that match. And having worked at Ida now, we've heard this anecdotally from a lot of women have had that same kind of issue growing up in the sport. So that's kind of a main difference. And then there's some other, different physiological needs of women as well. Women tend to be a lower body mass, so there's different needs potentially for the sole or the underside of the shoe. So with those, studs on the bottom, do those need to be as big for women versus men? Potentially not. So that's kind of a big lens of thought in the sports science world of soccer. Sorry, I keep going between football boot and soccer cleat, but I'll just use them interchangeably. But in football boot design. So that, along with, again, another aspect is arch support as well. Women tend to have higher arches, so providing a little bit more support under that arch can be quite helpful as well.
That's awesome. That's so fascinating, like looking into this. And, I feel like being a female athlete for so long, we can address the fact that we live in a men's world in a lot of ways where it's just adapted so differences and all that. One thing I'm really interested to hear about from you, doing a bit of research on what you've talked about, is the ignorance almost. We've talked a lot about ACLs, and at this point we know that women are about 4 to 8 times more likely to tear their ACLs. Can you go a bit into like where that research even comes from and how ACL research even started?
Yeah, I mean, in the sports science publication world, people have done a lot of work in all kinds of different sports. I mean, rugby as well, soccer, and looking at historically how many injuries have happened in the sport. It can be quite difficult actually in women's sport because it hasn't been as televised. So with men's sport, that research is actually much easier because there's clips online of that sport that you can watch and see what exactly happened. Was it contact with another player? Was it a non-contact injury? So with women's, it's actually quite difficult in years past because of that lack of, actual media out there. But recently it's a lot easier. So you'll find kind of these accounts of documenting women's injuries. I mean, we at Ida have even done it keeping up with both the NWSL and the WSL and looking at all those different injuries. I've played a big role in I'm the boot expert, so I can look at their Instagram and see exactly what boot model they're wearing, what stud type they're wearing. So that could be like a soft ground boot, which has the metal studs, or a firm ground boot. So there's different nuances in the boots that they're actually wearing as well. So that's where that research kind of comes from. And that's kind of why there's been a big discrepancy in it. And, you hear 4 to 8, like that's quite a big range as well. So we're still narrowing that down and figuring out exactly, what that number is and what can we attribute causes to it, because it is so multifaceted. So, I mean, there's no one thing and reason people can say. A lot of people throughout the years have loved to bring up Q angle over and over again. So the Q angle, if you're not aware, is a difference between kind of that hip angle compared to your knee. So women tend to have wider set hips compared to men. And so there's a different angle kinematically for women. So people love to harp on that, but that's an anatomical difference. What, we're not going to go around like knocking everyone's hips in, are we? So there's not really any point on continuing to harp on about that. But there are so many others. This tweet I love from Joanne Parsons. I can link you to it as well later if you want, but she kind of writes out this just handwritten diagram of, you can tell it's been done pretty quickly, just scribbling right all these different factors, and it includes so many different factors for ACL injury and risk of ACL injury. And it varies from just social differences, maybe women being the primary home, caretaker, or just generally lower pay, anything from those social issues to then just differences in training growing up, when they were younger, they probably didn't have access to training, or maybe it was as a society seen weirder for women or young girls to be in the gym lifting weights. So there's those kind of risk factors. There's even more anatomical risk factors, as well as at IDA, we like to focus on those that have to do with the footwear and the interaction with the surface. So that's what we really investigate and put a lot of time and effort to, is how can we kind of create the perfect shoe to surface match for female athletes. So you play on a huge variety of surfaces. You could be playing on the muddiest pitch. I mean, my rec team in London plays, and it's so muddy sometimes, these pitches, So you could be designing a boot for that, or you could be designing a use for a pristine hybrid pitch. So a hybrid pitch is kind of like a natural grass, which has artificial fibers installed in it to make it last longer. So you'll see that at the big stadiums like Emirates Stadium and Wembley, I'm talking England here, but you'll find them in the US too, obviously, and all the big stages. And so that's a completely different type of surface. And then you've got your artificial grass surfaces. I could go on and on, but that kind of shoe surface interaction is very important, because if you think from a physics, biomechanics standpoint, if you have too much rotational traction, so that's the force required at the surface to kind of pivot and release from the surface. If you've got too much rotational traction there, and it's called kind of foot fixation, so stick and twist injuries, you might hear that term as well. So if you've got too much traction there, you might get stuck, and then your knee will continue to move, but your foot won't, and then it will twist, and that can be what's causing stress on your ligaments. So that's kind of that big mechanism that we want to avoid. And so we look to kind of design something that better supports the female athlete in those kind of situations.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. And, on this podcast, myself being a Division I soccer player, I'm spoiled in the sense of I get thrown like 5 pairs of cleats, I feel like, at the start of the season. And I have my typical cleats I wear, but I have my, my soft ground cleats for those muddy days that are a bit longer spiked and all that stuff. For the person who isn't as spoiled as me, what's kind of like the generic answer for this? Like, when you play on turf, what should that stud look like compared to the muddy rec field that you play on?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, we always say like it's better to slip than get stuck. So if you've got kind of, lower traction, so if you wear like a Astro or turf shoe, that's probably going to put you in a better situation on some of those artificial turf surfaces than, you definitely wouldn't want to wear a metal stud on that. So there's like big ranges, and there's different combinations of what you can wear and cannot wear. Even with artificial grass, you've got different generations of it. So you can play on a 2nd generation surface that's like a carpet. You can play on a really nice, pristine, well-maintained 3G, which has that rubber, those annoying pellets that get everywhere. So there's different levels of it, and even a 3G pitch can be not well maintained. You can find that rubber crumb really densely packs in there, and it feels completely different. So even then, we wouldn't just recommend one shoe. But again, you can't, like, some of these athletes, and especially with women, don't want to own 6 different pairs of shoes, or can't afford to own 6 different pairs of shoes. So where do you stand? I mean, it's a great question. And a lot of the industry has kind of leaned towards this FG/AG. So they say it can be used for both, firm ground and artificial grass. So IDA's boots specifically have more studs and shorter studs. So that is in order to better support the female athlete. But also with those shorter studs and increased studs, and also more round studs, it's said that we can then aim to kind of decrease that rotational traction on some of those denser pitches. So maybe something like that. Again, there's multi-ground, like a lot of boot manufacturers are making multi-ground boots now. So it can be quite confusing for the consumer as well. And I think education is the biggest aspect of it. So whether that's coming from your staff, whether it's physios or kitmen, or if it's coming from the boot manufacturers themselves. But I think I've talked to a lot of parents of young athletes as well as athletes themselves, and they don't even know about all of this. And I remember when I first started, I didn't know about all of it. I remember I played futsal in Argentina. I was living in Argentina for a summer and I played futsal, and I never played the sport before. It just wasn't big where I grew up. And I ended up getting AstroTurfs, and we were playing on like kind of like a cement surface. And I probably should have just gotten like flat-soled futsal shoes, because the Astros, weren't that great. Like I would slip or I'd get stuck, and I just had no idea at the time, So just making that clear, I think, is really important when we're talking injury as well, making it clear for their customers.
That makes so much sense. One thing that like I feel like we hear all the time in sports, and it's all over the IDA website, is at the end of the day, you can control what you can control. Like you alluded to earlier, I can't control my hip angle. I can't control the fact that I'm a female and I have hormones and all these other risk factors it is. What is it about IDA that helps control the controllables?
Yeah, definitely. So I think it's providing a more comfortable fit. So you'll find with a lot of just sports in the sports product industry in general, it's a lot of focus on performance. How can you be the fastest? We'll give you the lightest boot on the market and you'll be the fastest. But like when testing that product, they might just test it doing like a few lengths of a pitch. That's it. But think about 90 minutes. How is your foot going to feel in something that is light as a feather? I don't know if it's going to be very well supported. So with female athletes, we constantly hear just their number one design criteria is fit and comfort. And through achieving fit and comfort, you will achieve performance, because at the end of 90 minutes, you won't be thinking about your feet the entire time, So you can think about the ball, you can think about the next pass you're going to make, instead of thinking, oh my God, I need to get out of these shoes. So that's kind of the number one for IDA, is always that focus on fit and comfort. And through that, we can then achieve performance. So we do a lot of work with our athletes with custom like foot scanning, working with them to say, okay, maybe you should aim for this model. This will fit you a bit differently. This will be a bit snugger. And kind of working to achieve that fit. So we're constantly working with that and working with last makers. So the shoe last is kind of what the shoe is made around. So if you're in a factory, you'd see a bunch of these models that look kind of like a foot, but not really. Or if you're in like an old shoemaker's store, you would see that as well, like an old wooden last. So we've been working with a last maker in the UK and working to further develop our last kind of best suit that female athlete, as well as there's a range of athletes, right? Like even different ethnicities, we're kind of generalizing at one point here, and we're starting with females as opposed to generalizing everyone. But even between ethnicities, there's a lot of foot differences that still needs to be further explored, to be honest. And so even within females as well, you've got people with wider feet, narrow feet, and we always buy shoes based on length, but not necessarily width. So that's something that we're working towards at IDA, as well as exploring that, wider option. I myself, I'm very into this kind of, I don't know if it's as big in the US, but kind of this barefoot movement of freeing our feet and wearing wider shoes, as opposed to kind of constricting them to modern footwear. And within football boots, it's a very narrow, slim, streamlined world where players want, and when we're talking players, maybe it's the elite players, want boots that are super, super tight to their feet. I mean, I always heard anecdotes of players wearing like boots 2 sizes too small for them, just because they want that feeling. But I myself, as a recreational player, I don't want that. I go put my football boots on. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is so much tighter than when I'm barefoot working from home, or wearing wider shoes. So we're looking to kind of explore that lens of, allowing our feet to move naturally and to have a wider fit, so that we can then be able to correct our body posture. So if we're in like in a position that might be, higher risk, our body can then activate our muscles to get us out of that position. So yeah, that's a little bit of a rant, but
no, it's amazing. It's so fascinating. Like you said, like for the longest time, we've lived in a world where research is just generalized by one, and splitting it by gender and then ethnicity and age and level. And there's so many different factors. So like, I absolutely just love that we have people that are doing that research and looking into it. Jordyn and I talk on the podcast all the time about why we love IDA and like why we think that you guys are an extremely important company in the world of women's soccer that is growing so much. What is it about Ida for you that you truly love?
Yeah, so I've talked a lot about, I mean, I am kind of the research lead, so I've talked a little bit about the science and all of that. But to be honest, what I love most is also the social aspect of it. So, I mean, going into a store, I've been into a store in England like a few years ago when I just moved over because I grew up in the States and I moved over there. And in the States, like you could go into a store and they'd at least pretend, you know, there was like fleets there for women or there was quite a big women's section. But in the UK, there was like I was like, where's like the women's soccer section? Like, where can I buy some soccer shorts? And they like led me to this tiny rack of clothes. And I was like, are you serious? Like, this is it? Like, are you serious? Like, what, you know, what year are we in here? And I was just bewildered by it all. And it's the US is actually, you know, quite ahead in terms of they've got a recognition of women in sport. We had Title IX. You know, we've got some equity there, but other countries around the world, it's not there. I mean, like I said, I've lived in quite a few South American countries during my time at uni and really got to know kind of the sport over there as well. And I was in Argentina during the 2019 World Cup. And you think, oh, wow, that must be amazing. You know, Argentina's mad on football, but not women's, you know. I could barely find, I would sit in a cafe, be on a VPN to watch like the US women's games. And I don't know, I mean, I hear that's why it's really exciting 2023. I've heard from some friends still over there, you know, like it seems to be getting a lot better. I was excited to be in Australia during it, so I'm a little bit biased and I saw the buzz around it and maybe I didn't see in other countries, but I've heard that, you know, it's growing and it's massive. But from a social side, back to Ida, we want to kind of be there for young girls as they go into a store and, you know, say, oh, I want a new soccer shirt. You know, we want to be there for them and or new boots. Like they should go in and feel that they belong in the sport, if that makes sense. So that's kind of what I love the most about Ida's mission is, you know, we're here to kind of push the big brands, to push ourselves if they're not going to do it, to show up for the female athlete, whether it's a young girl or whether it's a woman who's 75 and still kicking around. So interestingly, I'm also on a project in the UK where we're working with a lot of women over 50 and looking at, you know, how their feet have changed throughout their life as well. And it's a consistent thing, and we should be looking to kind of increase longevity of play and inclusion in play, both with injury as well as the social side of feeling like you belong in the sport, feeling like big thing for women over 50 has been after giving birth to kids, they've just like really struggled to get back into the sport. So helping, you know, support them through that and getting back into sport to stay active, healthy, as well as socially engaged as well.
No, that's absolutely amazing. Like we've said before, we're so thankful for Ida and everything that they're doing. We love bringing them stateside. I know I love wearing my Ida cleats whenever I can. They're some of my favorite ones. I got the all white rises. Those things are like
Nice.
feel good when I put
Just
them.
wait till next year. We got an upgrade.
All right. We got a little inside scoop here. Well,
Yeah, early next year. Keep an eye out.
all right. Thank you so much for joining the pod. We are so thankful for everything that you all do. And truly, it means the world to a female athlete like me to be able to walk into a store and see everything. So it's remarkable. And thank you so much. Well, everyone, there you have it. Thank you so much for spending your Thanksgiving with us. Everyone, we are so thankful for Girls Soccer Network, for Ida Sports, for all of you guys' listeners. You know, obviously, this journey has been absolutely remarkable, talking about our college soccer experiences, talking about and documenting the season alongside Jordyn and, you know, watching the game grow in certain ways, like Emelia talks about with Ida, and being able to walk into a store and see that women's soccer section growing. It's been remarkable to see over my time as a soccer player. And I can't wait for the more growth. And it's something I'm truly thankful for this year. So don't worry, the big life is not over. Even though Jordyn and I are both out of season, we have so many exciting topics to talk about, talking about transfer portal, talking about end of year meetings and what that can look at. And finally, maybe getting Iowa soccer coach David Diani on the pod. There's so much going on, and I cannot wait to bring it all to you. As always, reach out if you have questions, if you have topics you want us to talk about. We always want to hear your insight, and thank you so much.